Notre Dame just landed one of their top quarterback targets in the class of 2027, and he has a chance to be the highest-rated quarterback the Irish have signed since C.J. Carr. It is yet another example of how quarterback recruiting under Marcus Freeman is trending way up. But on the flip side, Notre Dame's top target left on the board in the class of 2026 pushed his commitment date back 2 weeks. So what does it really mean? We're covering all that and more on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the past 5 years. Thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And before we dive in, please take a second to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. That way you never miss an episode. But in case you missed the 2 episodes from earlier this week, I had the chance to interview Ian Book for over an hour. So we released it in 2 parts on Monday and Tuesday. So go check that out if you have not done so already. I had such a fun time doing it. It was really cool to go back and talk through all the defining moments of Ian Book's storied Notre Dame career. And by the time you're tuning into this episode, I'm going to be in France on vacation, but I had to get this episode out because we've got some big recruiting news to cover. Notre Dame just landed Teddy Jarrard, a 4-star quarterback in the class of 2027, who could be the future face of the program. So I'm going to give you the full breakdown of his game, how the Irish landed him, and what it means for the future of the quarterback room. Then we're going to zoom out and talk about how Marcus Freeman has completely changed the game when it comes to quarterback recruiting. Names like Kenny Minchey, C.J. Carr, and now Teddy Jarrard show just how much the standard has been raised at Notre Dame. Finally, we're going to dive into the latest twist in the recruitment of Elijah Golden, Notre Dame's top target left on the board in the class of 2026. He pushed his commitment date back 2 weeks, which is usually a red flag, but I still like where the Irish are at. I'm going to explain why at the end. But first, let's dive into Teddy Jarrard's background, his recruiting profile. So he's listed at 6'3", 190 pounds, and he plays for North Cobb High School. He's from Kennesaw, Georgia. And right now, he is ranked as the number 15 quarterback in the country and the number 195 player overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite. But the rankings are kind of all over the place. That's why I like to go with the composite to try to average them all out. But Rivals has Jarrard as the number 2 quarterback in the class and the top 100 prospect. Meanwhile, 24/7 Sports in their own rankings have him pegged as a 3-star and the number 18 quarterback in this class. This isn't that uncommon to have such an extreme disparity in rankings among services because he's still very young. He still has 2 more high school seasons to play before he even steps foot on campus. But Jarrard's stock has really skyrocketed over the summer. He's been to a bunch of different camps. He was a top performer at Ohio State's 7-on-7 camp. He also performed really well at the Rivals camp a few weeks ago. We had Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith on the show, who was at the Rivals camp. He said he was really impressed by what he saw from Teddy Jarrard. And the important thing here is that the Notre Dame coaching staff identified Teddy Jarrard and Peyton Houston as their top 2 quarterback prospects in this class, and they were able to land him. So this is a big win for Gino Guidugli, Mike Denbrock, Marcus Freeman, the entire Notre Dame coaching staff. And their approach to quarterback recruiting in this class has been interesting, to say the least, right? I've been pretty critical of the approach, but it worked out in the end. So, I can question Gino's process here, but it ultimately worked out because they got their guy. So it's been well documented that Notre Dame waited until June 21st of this year to extend a single scholarship offer to any quarterback in the class of 2027. This is pretty uncommon because usually quarterback recruiting, that cycle is heavily advanced and guys commit very early on in their process. So guys are already starting to commit to different schools by the time Notre Dame had even offered anyone. And they only picked 2 guys. They kind of went all in on Jarrard and Peyton Houston. And at this point, it looks like Peyton Houston is going to commit elsewhere. And this is just a big change from the previous cycle when they already had Noah Grubbs committed by June 1st of last year. And the reasoning that we had heard was that they wanted to evaluate all these guys in person, and their timelines were pushed back a little bit because of the run to the national championship. They went deep into the calendar, obviously, played the 16th and final game of the college football season, so they had to make up some ground on the recruiting trail. But ultimately, Notre Dame was able to make up ground quickly with Jarrard, despite the fact that they offered him pretty late in the process. And ultimately, Teddy picked Notre Dame over Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. At one point, It felt like Clemson was the leader for Jarrard, but they landed a commitment from Kareem Hewley on July 10th. And once that happened, Teddy narrowed down his list. And ultimately, the relationships with the Notre Dame staff were a key factor here. And Teddy has made it clear in interviews he wants to go to a place where he can compete for the job early, and that might be possible at Notre Dame depending on how Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert develop. And even though Notre Dame waited a really long time to offer Teddy Jarrard, they were obviously in pretty consistent communication with him leading up to this process. The one thing that I will give Gino and the staff credit for in the way that they handled this was they were very transparent to all the quarterbacks that they were recruiting, that they were going to approach it a little bit differently. They were going to wait to extend that offer, and they were only going to extend it to a few guys early on. So at least the communication was what it should be, and I think that's a big reason why they were able to land Jarrard here just a few weeks after they officially offered him a scholarship. So what is Notre Dame getting in Teddy Jarrard? A guy who already has a lot of playing experience despite the fact that he's only a rising junior at the high school level. He started on the varsity team as a true freshman, which is a big accomplishment in and of itself. Like, I can't even imagine playing and starting varsity as a true freshman. Now, granted, I'm not nearly as good of an athlete as Teddy Jarrard is, and I was 5'2", 105 pounds soaking wet when I started high school. Luckily, I grew a little bit, but when I first started playing high school football when I was a freshman, I remember walking in on the first day of weight training in the summer, and some of the seniors looked at me like I was psychotic, like I was a sixth grader shadowing for whatever reason. Then I actually stepped in the weight room. They're like, oh my God, this poor kid is actually signing up to play. That was 1 year, finally hit my growth spurt, kinda. I'm still not very, very tall, but that was just, it's funny to look back and think about, wow, there's no way I could have started on varsity as a true freshman. Meanwhile, Teddy Jarrard is doing it at quarterback, and he performed well his freshman season. He completed 153 of 260 passes, which is right around 59% for over 2,000 yards, and had 18 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. But he followed up that season with a breakout year as a sophomore, in which he completed 209 of 291 passes, which is a nearly 72% completion percentage, a big increase from his freshman season, threw for over 2,600 yards, 31 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Shout out to my guy, Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated for the stats there. So clearly, based on this progression from his freshman year to his sophomore year, you can tell that Jarrard is becoming way more accurate, and I think a big reason why is his work ethic. Everything you hear about him, he has really intense work ethic, and it's starting to show on the field. So you think about how much he's progressed from his freshman year to his sophomore year, just think, if he stays on that trajectory, how good he could be by the end of his senior season in high school. I think in time, he's going to have to get stronger, develop more power, but he's off to a great start, and even though his high school doesn't use him a lot in the designed run game, I think he's a very good scrambler. Watching his film, it honestly kind of reminds me of Ian Book and his ability to escape pressure. He has a knack for getting first downs, and when guys get in the backfield, he has a nice spin move, which is a signature of Ian Book. He can get out of the pocket, and he continues to look downfield. There's this great play where he rolls out to his right, has a ton of time to throw. He's literally yelling to the wide receiver who is on the left side of the field while Jarrard is on the right hash to go downfield, go to the end zone. Jarrard lofts it up. Receiver makes a great play for a touchdown, but it's those kinds of plays that get you excited. Sometimes he has a tendency to throw off his back foot, but I think that's just because he's such a good athlete. He knows that he can still make the throw. He's going to get better at that in time. Again, he is still so young, and when he sets his feet and throws, he rifles the ball in there, so he's a really exciting prospect, and I personally think that Jarrard has a little bit more potential, like a higher ceiling than Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert, but those guys will be on campus well before Jarrard, especially Blake Hebert, who's already been on campus at Notre Dame. So I do think that Jarrard is going to have a chance to compete for the job early on in his career, because think about it this way. Whoever wins the quarterback competition, whether it be C.J. Carr or Kenny Minchie, they're going to be the starter, hopefully, in 2025, 2026, maybe even 2027. I mean, I guess the best case scenario would be that whoever wins this job ends up starting the next 3 years, but if they're really, really good, then they're probably going to leave for the NFL after 2026. But again, that is a long way down the road. But say they wait until 2027, right? Or they're around Notre Dame until 2027. That would be down to Grubbs, Hebert, and now Jarrard. And considering Grubbs and Hebert are both looked at as developmental prospects, like who knows where they will be at that point in their career. And obviously this is a really long way. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think if Jarrard develops how the staff hopes that he will, I think he's going to have a chance to compete to be the starter in his second year, which is 2028. Again, a long way down the road, but I think that's how his career projects at Notre Dame. He is now the third commit in the class of 2027. Sean Kraft was technically the first as a long snapper, and then linebacker Ellis McGaskin was the second, but it is very important to have your quarterback committed very early on so then you can build the class around him. It becomes a much more enticing pitch to wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends when they know who their quarterback is going to be, especially when the quarterback is as good as Jarrard. And it sounds like he's going to be a very active recruiter as well, which is what you want out of your quarterback. Like, I've been a little bit critical of how Notre Dame went all in on Noah Grubbs very early, and they turned down Dia Bell, who is now a 5-star and committed to Texas. But one thing that you have to give Noah Grubbs a ton of credit for is that he has recruited his ass off to get other players to commit to Notre Dame. Like, whenever you hear about receivers and running backs committing, they all talk about how Noah was a big part of their recruitment and just how he was on them all the time talking up Notre Dame. So that is what you want in your quarterback commit. It looks like that's what Notre Dame is getting in Teddy Jarrard, because these guys travel all around the country. They're going to a bunch of different camps. They're going to all these like elite showcases and things like that. And they're going to be competing with the best recruits in the country. So if you have a player like that committed this early on, especially at quarterback, it helps a ton. So overall, I didn't love the process to get here, but I love the end result because Notre Dame won big by getting Teddy Jarrard to commit. So hats off to Gino Guidugli, man. I was critical of him and how he approached this process, but he got his guy. It's a big win for him and this Notre Dame team. So Teddy Jarrard's commitment is obviously exciting, but the bigger story here might be how Notre Dame has quietly turned into a quarterback recruiting machine under Marcus Freeman. Let's take a closer look right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and even makes regular season games feel all that more exciting and feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. So I was looking at FanDuel today, and I saw that Notre Dame is plus 1,300 to win the national championship right now. So if you bet $100 and the Irish pull it off, you will win $1,300. Just something to think about here. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So I remember last summer when I was doing some shows and the conversation that a lot of Notre Dame fans are having were, why did they go in the transfer portal to get Riley Leonard? I don't think many people are questioning that decision anymore, considering Riley Leonard led Notre Dame to a national championship appearance, but it was a big topic of debate, especially after Notre Dame brought in Sam Hartman the year before. And even though I think Sam Hartman did a lot of good things at Notre Dame, it was a little bit underwhelming compared to the expectations for Hartman going in. And maybe that was on all of us who had super high hopes for Sam Hartman and what he could do at Notre Dame. But considering Notre Dame went into the transfer portal to get Hartman and to get Riley Leonard, and they also went in a couple years before that to get Jack Cohn, that's 3 transfer quarterbacks in 4 years. So a lot of people were wondering, why is Notre Dame always going out in the transfer portal to get a quarterback? Well, the answer is pretty simple. They didn't recruit well enough at quarterback. And that was the thing that I said over and over and over again. Like, they were making up for misses on the recruiting trail from well before that, right? So if you look through it, in the 5-year run before Marcus Freeman became the head coach at Notre Dame, these are the quarterbacks that Notre Dame signed. So in 2018, they signed a top 5 quarterback, a guy by the name of Phil Jurkovec. I remember when Phil committed to Notre Dame, there was so much hype around his commitment because Notre Dame had not gotten a commit from that highly ranked quarterback in a really long time. So there's all this excitement, and then it led to all kinds of difficult conversations once he was on campus because Ian Book, the 3-star, ended up being better than him, but fans were still enamored by the rankings at the time. So it created a weird dynamic. We actually talked about it with Ian earlier this week, and he was pretty candid about that. But then in 2019, after they got a top 5 quarterback, I guess they decided to take this recruiting class off because they signed Brendan Clark and got him to commit very early on. And let's just say I don't think there was a ton of competition with other big-time programs for Brendan Clark's services, but I think the mindset at the time was you get one top 5 quarterback and then you get another developmental guy the year before, but that strategy has been proven wrong because you need to just continue stacking top quarterback recruits every single year because some of these guys are going to miss even if they're ranked pretty high. Then in 2020, they signed Drew Pine. I think that was a miss. In 2021, they got Tyler Buckner. Again, Very highly ranked prospect, ton of hype coming into Notre Dame. They thought that he was going to be the guy to take them over the top, lead them to a national championship. Well, it turns out for Tyler Buchner, a lot of unfortunate things happened in his career. Got hurt when he was in high school, then couldn't even play his senior season because of the COVID pandemic, and then got to Notre Dame, started out the 2022 season, immediately gets hurt in the second game of the year, misses the rest of the regular season, and then Notre Dame brought in Sam Hartman, so he never found his footing at Notre Dame, but now he's back with the Irish, and I think he's going to be the third-string quarterback this year. Then in 2022, they got Steve Angeli, and they got him really early, and I felt like he was an exciting prospect from Bergen Catholic, good high school career, all that stuff, but was still seen as a developmental guy. I think he was a really good backup for Notre Dame for the past few years, but it didn't work out. He got his degree, and now he's at Syracuse, and Notre Dame was going to have to face him on senior day. But he got beat out by C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey. So you look at that. That's 5 straight classes, 5 straight misses. Then Marcus Freeman comes in. First quarterback he gets, Kenny Minchey. And that cycle did not start off great at all. Notre Dame went all in on getting the 5-star Dante Moore out of Michigan, who silently committed to the Irish at one point, but continued to entertain other suitors. And now that years have passed, I feel comfortable saying that he was a silent commit, even though at the time, everyone was trying to convince us that he was not silently committed. That's not true. He was silently committed to Notre Dame, but was still looking at Texas A&M, was still looking at Oregon, was going on visits, doing all this stuff, and the staff was pushing for him to announce it publicly, but he just wouldn't do it. Well, while Dante Moore was kind of doing what he wanted to do, Notre Dame did what they wanted to do, and they got C.J. Carr to commit in the class of 2024, which was not Dante Moore's cycle, but for whatever reason, when Notre Dame got C.J. Carr, that was enough for Dante Moore to drop Notre Dame entirely. He was very upset with the Notre Dame coaching staff. I really don't understand why, because it's like, okay, you're silently committed, you won't even announce it publicly, and also C.J. Carr is in the next class. Again, we've talked about this before on the podcast. It was a long time ago. Dante Moore ended up committing to Oregon. Then he flipped to UCLA at the 11th hour, started for the Bruins as a true freshman, struggled mightily, ultimately transferred back to Oregon, is probably going to start for the Ducks this year. Notre Dame did not have a quarterback committed in that class for a long time. It looked like they were going to strike out, but then Tommy Rees was able to get Minchey to decommit from Pitt in November of that year. He visited for the Boston College game, which was senior day that week, and ultimately they got him to commit during that visit, and he was a very talented prospect. It's rare that it works out like this on such late notice, but Minchey was a top 200 player, number 14 quarterback in the class, but was really good at the Elite 11, and this was a big-time win, and now here he is in year 3 competing to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. He's competing with the guy they got in 2024, which is C.J. Carr. And by the time that Minchey committed to Notre Dame, they had already had C.J. Carr for months. Carr dominated at Irish Invasion, committed right after, was a borderline 5-star at the time, finished as the number 6 quarterback in the class, number 68 player overall by the 24/7 Sports Composite, and he was the highest rated quarterback commit since Phil Dracovic back in 2018. Now he has a chance to compete for the starting job. And the stuff you hear about him behind the scenes, they talk about C.J. Carr like he is a really, really special player. Is he good enough to win the job right now? Remains to be seen. But the fact that they got Kenny Minchey and C.J. Carr in back-to-back classes, 2 players who are really good, like if you took either one of these guys and put them in the quarterback room in 2022, they are winning that job over Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine. So they have 2 really good candidates to start this year because of what they did on the recruiting trail in 2023 and 2024. So 2025, it looked like they were set to add in another top quarterback recruit in Deuce Knight. And that was a roller coaster. He committed to Notre Dame the week leading up to the Ohio State game in 2023. Vibes were great. He was this extremely talented prospect from Mississippi. Notre Dame actually was recruiting him well before he kind of rose to stardom because he was not even in the top 150 when Notre Dame first started recruiting him. Then you saw his profile really start to go up and up and up. During his junior season of high school, Notre Dame was in great shape with him. He visited campus a bunch of times, was recruiting all these other prospects. And then the summer of 2024 rolled around, and it became very clear that Deuce Knight was probably going to decommit from Notre Dame and end up at Auburn because he was visiting them every single weekend, sometimes in secret. But the coaching staff at Notre Dame continued to recruit him hard, and they felt like they were going to keep him. It didn't happen. Ultimately, Knight flipped to Auburn, and who knows how that's going to go for Deuce Knight under Hugh Freeze, because if Hugh Freeze doesn't win 8 or 9 games this year, he's probably getting fired, and that looks pretty likely at this point. But behind the scenes, even though Notre Dame was projecting confidence, they were also talking to other quarterback prospects from around the country, including Blake Hebert out of Connecticut, who was committed to Clemson. Blake was a high 3-star or 4-star, depending on what recruiting site you were looking at, but he's the number 26 quarterback in the class on the 24/7 Sports composite. Notre Dame was actually really high on Blake Heber early on in the process, but then they got Knight to commit. They prioritized Knight more than other quarterbacks at the time. Then Heber ended up committing to Clemson, and then Notre Dame was ultimately able to get him to flip. He's seen as a developmental player, needs a few years before he's probably ready to compete for a job in college, but the staff was really impressed by what he showed during spring ball, not just as a thrower, but also as a runner. He's a sneaky dual threat player, and that's something that this Notre Dame coaching staff is really excited about. Now you have the class of 2026. They got Noah Grubbs to commit on June 1st of 2024. The staff was down to Grubbs and Brady Hart, and Hart actually ended up committing to Michigan, but reclassified and is now enrolled at Texas A&M, reclassified very late in the recruiting cycle. And Grubbs has not moved up the rankings like I thought he might, and I think the Notre Dame coaching staff thought he might as well. He's currently rated as the number 14 quarterback in the class. He is just outside the top 200 players nationally, and he did not make it to the Elite 11 finals, which hosts the best quarterback recruits in the country. And I'm not writing off Grubbs as a prospect. His offensive line for his high school team is not good at all. It's been a struggle for him, but I just don't understand why the staff didn't pursue Dia Bell a little bit harder. I already mentioned him. He's a 5-star committed to Texas. Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports has said repeatedly that Dia Bell would have committed to the Irish, but the staff chose not to take him. We're going to see how Grubbs develops. Clearly, they see something in him, but it could be a missed opportunity. But think about this. The fact that they have Noah Grubbs committed, and I'm questioning the decision, right? And he's just outside the top 200 prospects in the entire country. That should show you how much quarterback recruiting has improved when it's like they got this guy who could end up being really good, but maybe they could have done better. Like that is a sign of how much things have gotten better, where you compare that to 2019 with Brendan Clark. It's a much different story these days. And now here we are, class of 2027. They get Teddy Jarrard to commit. Like I said, I think he could end up being better than Noah Grubbs and Blake Heber. Things can change over time, but it is such a big deal to get the quarterback they perceive as one of the 2 best at this stage very early on. And I think that Teddy Jarrard has a chance to climb into the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. The way that he is improving, the way that his stock is just sort of soaring this summer, I think it's only going to continue. I expect a big-time junior season out of him in Georgia. And then if that carries over into senior year, like the sky is the limit. I think he has a better team around him as well. So you look at it overall, obviously, adding Minchie and adding Carr, those are big hits in terms of their ability. One of them might transfer depending on who ends up winning the job, but they are good players. We know that to be true already. Blake Hebert and Noah Grubbs don't have the star power as the other two, but they were high priorities for the staff early on, and they were ultimately able to land them, and now they did the same thing with Jarrard. So you look at that run, 23, 24, 25, 26, and now 27, they end up with one of their top targets. That was not the case before, but that is the case now under Marcus Freeman. And if you have the quarterback position right, you're probably going to be pretty good. That is just the way that modern football works, and Notre Dame is in a much better place in that room now than they were years ago. So Notre Dame's quarterback room is looking locked in, but let's turn now to a crucial front 7 piece. 2026 defensive tackle Elijah Golden just pushed his commitment date back. So should Notre Dame fans be worried? Let's talk about it right after this. So I want to wrap up today's show with some quick thoughts about Elijah Golden. Golden has been one of Notre Dame's top priority targets in this class for a really long time. He's really talented, and he plays a position of serious need, defensive tackle. And we have talked extensively on this show about Notre Dame's misses at defensive tackle. So to have a player like Golden seemingly right there for the taking, right before he's set to announce his commitment date, it feels like they're right on the cusp of landing him, which would round out a really incredible class of 2026. Golden was set to announce his commitment date this Saturday, July 26th, but he decided to push it back 2 weeks, and now he's going to announce on Saturday, August 9th. Notre Dame has been considered the leader for most of his recruitment, I would say, but especially since his official visit in June. And he's seen as the last target on the board. Notre Dame has 26 commits right now. Golden would be the 27th. He'd be the 4th defensive lineman to commit, and it would really round out the class as a whole. But whenever a prospect decides to push his commitment date back 2 weeks, it's usually not a good sign if you're the leader, because it gives other schools an opportunity to sort of pull him away. And at this point, Golden is down to Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Virginia Tech. But it is my understanding that this decision to push his commitment date back a couple weeks is not because he's now not going to pick Notre Dame. I think something happened in his personal life, and it just made more sense to announce at a later date. That's all I feel comfortable sharing at this point in time, but I don't think that this means that Notre Dame is no longer the leader. They are certainly going to have to fight to keep him. Oklahoma is desperate because the Brent Venables era has not gone as they had hoped, so they really need to knock it out of the park with this recruiting class and this upcoming season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're willing to throw around some serious money. Plus, Brent Venables is a defensive guy. He's a good recruiter, so I'm sure they're recruiting Golden really hard. And also, Alabama has been on Elijah Golden for a long time. He plays football in SEC country, and Alabama has been on an absolutely insane run lately on the recruiting trail. They have added a bunch of 5 stars, including some big-time defensive linemen. So even though recruiting at Notre Dame has been going very well this summer, it's also been going really well at Alabama. So those are some big-time programs in the mix for his services. But still, I ultimately think he is going to pick Notre Dame because Notre Dame has shown him how much they value him. I think that he appreciates that and he wants to be a member of this class. I'm sure that the other commits in this class are also recruiting him really hard. And considering Notre Dame has been the leader for so long, I just feel like ultimately that is where he's going to end up. And the fact that he is really their only target left on the board who is not committed to them in the class of 2026 means that Notre Dame is going to go all in on trying to get him to commit. It is not a done deal. I think at one point it kind of felt like a done deal, but not at this point. Like I said, Oklahoma and Alabama are going to fight until the bitter end to try to get him to commit to their school, but Notre Dame has to get this done. And because they have to get it done, I think they will. It's going to be a challenge. It's a big challenge for Al Washington. It's a big challenge for Chris Ash, the new defensive coordinator, and Marcus Freeman. But considering Notre Dame has been landing it with every single one of their top targets, like it seems impossible, right? That they would actually miss out on a guy that they really want. It seemed to happen a lot more in past years, but this year, with the way that the staff has been recruiting, I just have confidence that they're going to get this done. I do remember last year when Derek Meadows was set to announce his commitment date, and it looked like Notre Dame was the leader at one point, and then it flipped to LSU, but Notre Dame was fighting super hard at the very end to try and get him to commit. He ended up pushing his commitment date back a week, and you thought maybe Notre Dame was going to pull this off. And then he ended up committing to LSU just like he had originally planned. But then Meadows ended up flipping to Alabama, so that recruitment was all over the place. But now with Elijah Golden, I don't think it's the same thing. I don't think that he's pushing it back just because Oklahoma or Alabama convinced him to do that. But still, it's going to come down to the wire to some extent. I just have faith in this Notre Dame coaching staff that they're going to get it done. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but that is the latest on Elijah Golden. Again, we're going to be talking about him more in the coming weeks, and then certainly after he makes his commitment official on August 9th. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for tuning in. And if you have not already, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show, please take a second to like this video below, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or your preferred podcast app. I am still on vacation, but I've got another episode lined up for the start of next week on Monday. I'm going to be joined by an expert on the Miami Hurricanes to preview Notre Dame's season opener. That game is just a few weeks away, believe it or not, and you're not going to want to miss it. But have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday.